Okay, I think we're ready. Where do we see participants? Oh, people are joining. Welcome, everybody. We're going to give it a few minutes while everybody comes and joins us from around the world. If you have a chance, we'd love to see where you're joining us from. It's always exciting to see that we have people joining us from Mexico, but we've had people from all sorts of places in the US, and we had people from Europe before. So if you'd like to put in the chat where you're joining us from. Oh, we've got some people. Oh, that was Ginger. Where are you joining us from? Yeah, put in the chat where you're joining us from. Welcome back to the second of the two-part series with Natalia Lopez Mota. I'm going to give it a few more minutes as we have 20 people joining us. We got Mexico, Chicago. And last time, where did we have any people from Europe last time? Do you remember, Natalia? Any of your friends joining us?
Yeah, I don't know if right now somebody's connected, but I have some people that contact to see the recorded version so that they can say it in their own time. But I don't know if somebody's right now connected. I'll be happy to hear from you. Greetings to all the people that are greeting from Chicago, from San Miguel. I'm happy that you liked the last session.
Yeah, and thanks for the reminder. Anybody who was not unable to join us last week, we have the first part of this series on our website at languageadventurepros.com. All of our webinars are there and available to watch at your convenience. So I guess, let's see, are there people still joining? 21, you think we'll give it a few more minutes? I'll just do, so welcome to Language Adventure Pros webinar series. Today we have Natalia Lopez Mota joining us. Natalia is a Mexican winemaker who is passionate about nature, science, creativity, traditions, and human perception. She's a food chemist with a specialty in sensory analysis from UNAM, with an International Masters of Science degree in Enology, Viticulture, and Terroir from France, Italy, and Spain. Natalia has 8 years of experience working in the wine industry in Mexico. She works as a winemaker consultant at different wineries in central Mexico. She also consults chefs and restaurants on the subject of wine pairings and works as a professor training sommeliers. In 2017, she and her partner founded their own winery, Cava Garamboyo, here in San Miguel de Allende. They specialize in naturally fermented wines. If you get a chance, I highly recommend going out and seeing it. It's a beautiful location and it's a really sweet little setup, and you can learn a lot more about the process of winemaking, and Natalia is a wonderful teacher, as you will see today. One of her biggest skills, as you know, is to translate wine into an accessible subject for people. So we are super excited to have her here today for the second part of our series. We have upcoming, after Natalia's webinar, in July, we have Alberto Lenz, who is a muralist. He was the former director of the Bellas Artes here in San Miguel de Allende, and he will be doing a 3-part series called Revolution on the Walls, which is about how the Mexican Revolution spurred the movement of muralism and how murals were used to convey political opinions during that time. So please join us for that. You can see our past webinars, you can register for our future webinars, and you can donate to these webinars on our website, Language Adventure Pros. So without further ado, I present Natalia.
So here we are for our second session. So I hope that we all have a great time learning more about wines of Mexico. First of all, I also would like to thank to everybody that have donated for this webinar. You cannot imagine like the support that this is for our project and for the harvest this year. So it's going for a good place and for good production, and it's helping a lot. So thanks a lot for the donations, for all of those who could donate something. So here we are, and I also want to thank all the questions that we received. and the feedback from last session. So a lot of your questions, I hope that they will be answered here. So first of all, I wanted to share with you some of the information that somebody asked last week. So somebody was asking the information related, I think, to Chile, Argentina, and the numbers here of the surface under vines. So if somebody is connected here that was interested in that subject, maybe you can make a screenshot of the presentation and then you can have the numbers. And something that we were also speaking about last session, a lot of people were asking about like if Mexico or some of the regions were more suitable maybe for white wines and in relation to the climate. So we're going to understand this session quite deeply about the profile of each region and what is the most, the biggest potential of each region. But I also wanted to share with you these numbers to explain you also why a lot of wineries are into production of red wines. So if you see here of all the wines, not only Mexican wine, like all the wine that Mexico consumes, 71% is from the market, it's red. So white wines only represent a share of 11%. So that is one of, and sparkling is 9 and rosé is 9. So that is one of the reasons of also why a lot of wineries like are, I don't know, maybe like a little bit holding back the idea of exploring as so many other regions in the world, like that they are like big for white, or wineries that are like maybe 50% of their production is white wines. Like we get a lot those questions when somebody come to the winery and they're like, do you have whites? Do you have rosés? So I know that for the international market, these numbers are not exactly like this, you know? So maybe seeing how Mexico, the behavior of Mexican consumption also explains you the demand of the clients also to the producers and the trends that finally the producers are working with. And then we were speaking about this graph where we were seeing all the different regions and that we're going to be speaking about today. So here you have the numbers that I mentioned, that I didn't have it complete the last time, the graph. So last week I was sharing with you percentages, but I'd rather to share with you the amount of hectares. I think that it's a good number for you to see like how big is each of these region, no? Like in comparison, for example, to Baja California that we were mentioning, that is the biggest region in Mexico. So you can see for how many hectares the production separates from other regions. So, sorry, and there was San Luis Potosí and Aguascalientes. So moving forward, I would like to start today speaking about Guanajuato. Since a lot of people join us from San Miguel de Allende and you were very curious about Guanajuato, so I decided to invert the order. So even that Baja California is very big and is very important for Mexican wine, we are going to see it after Guanajuato. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to go very deep into Guanajuato because it's where we are, where I work, and I think that there is a lot to share for people that will live here to understand better where is the region and what we're producing here and which are the wineries, etc. So I received these questions. So in this part, I hope that we are answering most of them. So I think that the question number one is a great question. So it's speaking about how is the rainy season distributed here in Mexico. So I'm going to show you some graphs so that you can also understand the difference in between the behavior here and how it affects in relation to viticulture. I'm going to try to make some comparisons from the region in accordance to other international regions. So obviously there is a huge difference always, but I'm going to try to show you a little bit about similarities so that you can have a reference, and I always like to play with that. We're going to speak about the varieties, and we're going to speak also about where you can get Guanajuato wine here in San Miguel de Allende or in Mexico in general. For people that are seeing us from abroad, I know that that might not mean a lot, but also we can speak about international market. There are some importers working for US and for Canada, and maybe you can track some wines there. So speaking about Guanajuato, I would like to start with a video. So I don't know, Ginger, if we are ready for the video. You tell me so I can stop. Yes?
So let me share my screen.
So I'll stop sharing mine. So this video that we're going to see, it's a video that it's from the association, from the local associations of all the producers. So I would like to share it with you so that you can see a lot of the landscapes and you can see a lot of the different wineries. So I think Rebecca is going to help us with the translation. It has some phrases, but we're going to translate them along with the video. So
can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to play it now.
Spring shows us the strength of life. Cycles of rest serve to strengthen. New shoots bear powerful fruit. Waiting has its own reward. See you soon.
So that is a video. I hope that that you were able to see it properly, and if not, I can share you a link so you can see it with further detail and with more clarity. So we're going to speak about Guanajuato, and here you have a picture of the region in Dolores. So starting with Guanajuato, a lot of people that were here, we might know, and we are like, we have heard about the river that is here, that it's called the Rio Laja. So this is a picture that is very close to La Presa of San Miguel de Allende. So in total, Guanajuato has in whole state 350 hectares. the amount of wineries are 30 wineries in the region. We have 500 millimeters of rainfall. The climate, it's semi-continental and semi-desertic, and the most popular grape varieties are Malbec, Syrah, Merlot, Tempranillo, Grenache, Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, a little bit of Albarino, and I have here Pinot Noir written because Pinot Noir is very interesting variety here in the region of Guanajuato, although there are only very few wineries that have the grape varietal planted. So for example, from these 30 projects that I'm speaking about, only 2 have a plantation of Pinot Noir. So one of the things to start paying attention about Mexico in general is that you can imagine that each region, for example, the region of Guanajuato, 10 years ago, it used to have only 3 wineries. So we are still in a stage of in an experimental stage. So that means that when a new winery or a new plantation starts, it starts always with the dreams of the owners, with the idea of the wines that they would like to produce. Obviously, more and more with the association and with more projects that are starting to work as a reference for the new ones, like you can understand, like, oh, so these grape varietals are better, but still the space for experimentation is huge. So speaking about a varietal that is like emblematic for the region, even speaking about an emblematic grape varietal for Ensenada, this is still too early for Mexico to start speaking about it, because in general that requires a work in the cellar that will take a lot of time, and that will take sometimes maybe 2 generations to start understanding the potential side of the varietals. But that doesn't mean that we haven't worked and we haven't moved forward from the starting point. So in general, because of the region that has this semi-continental and semi-desertic climate, we have a great potential for Syrah, and we have a great potential for Malbec. I'm going to show you some graphs that speak about the weather in the region, but also when we're speaking about this Malbec and Syrah, I don't know if some of you might think already a little bit about, like, if we are saying that we're strong with the varietal of Syrah, and if we're saying that we're strong with the varietal of Malbec, and we're speaking about semi-continental and we're speaking about semi-desertic, for example, some of the profile of the wines, when we're working with Syrah here in this region, it's a little bit similar to the place where Syrah comes from, that is Côte du Rhône, for example. And Côte du Rhône, the northern side of Côte du Rhône, has this semi-continental climate in France. It's a little bit less hot than here. So we have, and obviously the difference in between how many meters above the sea in between Guanajuato and, for example, Côte du Rhône is very different. So we have differences, but in general, those varietals work very well here as they work in a similar climate. And for example, Malbec, speaking maybe about Argentina, and I speaking a little bit about Mendoza, there are similarities because of the continental side and because of the semi-desertic or more desertic side of Mendoza as well. So I hope that with the next information that we start seeing, you can go deeper to understand the nuances and the subtleties of which are the factors that create the identity of this region. And obviously these factors are factors that we are starting to study and to learn. I've been living here in San Miguel de Allende. Well, I have been working in San Miguel de Allende since 2012. So for me, it's 8 years of starting to know the region, starting to adapt my eyes and my professional skills to this ecosystem, and to instead of doing a copy paste work of like, I learned how to produce wines in France like this. Obviously, each winery require a path of not doing a copy paste. Maybe you get inspired or you get influenced by somebody else's work, but the most important thing is to actually understand our ecosystem and understand our factors. I'm going to share a little bit more of them. So these are the tendencies of the temperature and precipitation. So yes, indeed, for all of us that we live here, we know that our rainy season goes in the summer. And that is one of the biggest concerns when somebody is trying to learn about Mexican wine. It's like, how can you produce wine if the rainy season is in the summer? Especially for people that have lived abroad, and you know that in a wine region, usually you don't want rain during the harvest. So if we see these numbers, you're going to also understand one thing. Yes, we have our rainy season here. In general, we have an average of 500 millimeters of rain. That we're going to have the comparison. So for people that are not very familiar with this style of numbers or on this understanding the climate. So you have here this part. No? So for example, right now, you see like we have had some rain, but we are still waiting for the biggest rains to come during June and July. So for a lot of wine regions and a lot of viticulturists, rain is always a concern because rain is equal to lower concentration of sugar in the rain. It's always like your biggest nightmare, because when you have a lot of rain, then the grapes get a little bit diluted and they get bigger and they stop having so much concentration as you would like. And the third thing is that rain, it's always a huge threat, because that means humidity in the air, and that means that you might have fungus diseases that you will have to be fighting. So some of them might be oidio, peronospora, botrytis. So when I arrived to this region and I received this information of like our rainy season is in the summer, I was exactly the same, like very scared. And I was like, it won't be able to, how you can grow grapes here. But there is a factor that I think that it's very interesting, and that is how many meters were above the sea level. Because for those that we live here, we know that even that it's the rainy season, humidity, like we're in the semi-desert, so humidity doesn't stay very long. Like here, it might rain in the night, but early in the morning you have sun, and then it gets very dry. And because we are very high, the evapotranspiration, it's also very, very high. So in general, fungus disease is not a huge problem here. I did my master thesis on fungus disease related to organic and biodynamic viticulture in Trentino Alto Adige. And for example, a winery over there that it's organic might need to make a spray, might need to spray 11 times in the season, while here you can have an organic management and do maybe 4 times of spraying during the season. So in general, fungus disease is really not a problem here. Other the predators will be maybe ants. It's like our biggest nightmare. Birds, because since we're in the desert, while the sugar it's getting concentrated and you are almost arriving to July and to August, we're going to see when we harvest here. So the birds are searching for sugar, and we're not in a place that have a lot of fruit around. So one of the things that help us in our ecosystem are tunas from nopales, because they help to balance the ecosystem in that period. So in general, that is like a great, it's great for the local ecosystem if you're working towards permaculture or you're working towards organic as well, for example. Well, and for everybody, I think that they should use a lot of nopales. In general, tunas are great to balance that part of the earth. So this is one of the things. So other thing to understand is, for example, temperature. So this is our range of temperature that we have here. And we have, if you see, we do have some cold in the winter, but our winter is not very strong. So that is actually one of our biggest threats here in the region, because the vines have some trouble to go to sleep properly and to have the enough amount of rest. So there is a huge effort in viticulture practices to keep your vineyard enough balanced in other aspects, to help the vine to be very well tuned and adapt to her, like with her cycle within this climate and this ecosystem. So I like this graph, so I'm not going to be very geek and to stay too long here in the graphs. But for example, you have here Bordeaux, you have Puglia, you have Guanajuato. So this is the amount of sun hours that Guanajuato received. So for you, first, if you see here, for example, when we are doing the harvest season in Guanajuato, our harvest season is actually very early. For those that are familiar to harvest seasons in other parts of the world, for example, a lot of regions in France might start even in October. So in general, if we're speaking about Europe, you will have some regions that start in September, some regions that start in October. You might even have some regions for late harvest grapes and late harvest wines that start in November. So in general, we are very early, and I think that is a very important fact and information here in the region. So other important information is that our biggest peak of temperature, we get it in spring. We don't get it in the summer, because in spring we don't have that much rain. So in general, we don't have cloudy days. So we have very hot days in spring. So the hottest period here, it's spring, and then summer, it's much more cooler because we have that much amount of rain. So that means that we have cloudy days. So that I hope that for some of you, it's starting to give you some hints about the profile of wines that we might have here. Because all of this information, it's how we understand the style and the profile that this region has as a potential to work with. So for those that still don't have like enough the whole puzzle in your mind, I hope that we are starting to get some pieces, and that in the next minutes you will get more information for that. So here you have the altitude. So if you see, we are much more lower than Ensenada that we were speaking, that will be like, in theory, the last part in perspective with the equator where you can grow vines. But it is because of our height above the sea level that it creates these climatic conditions where grapes can grow. Because if we will be lower, then this part of Mexico won't be able to produce wines. But it is this balance of how high we are with these conditions of the influence from these mountain systems that help a lot with that. So we have volcanic soils. We have Los Picachos here. That is a volcano system that is like the last part of this mountain system influence. We have some volcanoes here in the region that they are not active, but the soils has these volcanic soils. We also have some clays and we have sandy soils. We have very shallow soil. So in general, we are not very, because we are in the desert and because of the erosion. So in general, like a lot of the vineyards here will be maybe, if you manage to have 60 centimeters of deepness in the soil, you're happy here. So that is one of the reasons of why this region could be very hard to be a region that will focus for low quality wines or for very commercial wines with very high yields. Because in general, this combination of the shallow soils, medium shallow soils, and like all these factors that I'm starting to mention creates that in general, the whole region, it's auto-regulated to work if you want to have a healthy vineyard in general with low yields. That means maybe in between 7 tons per hectare or 8 tons per hectare. But to try to reach maybe Chile, that a lot of wineries might work with yields of 15 tons per hectare, or sometimes even 20 tons per hectare for their cheap wines, that here, like, it is crazy. You cannot do it here. You need other style, other type of soils for producing bigger yields. So, so the amount of sun hours that I wanted to just show you here is, for example, if we're speaking about maybe here in between July and August that we are starting to harvest, if you see the amount of sun hours that we have here, where, for example, in 220, for example, Bordeaux, that will be considered a cool climate region, has a little bit more than what we are having here. And if you see, for example, Puglia, that will be a extreme hot climate region, you can see here that in that period of the year, they are like much higher than where we are. So don't get tricked by seeing nopales and cactuses and organos and seeing the desert and being hot in Mexico, and to perceive this country as a very hot country, while actually San Miguel de Allende and Guanajuato, it's one of the reasons of what it's categorized, and it's more suitable to understand it as a cool climate region. It's because our biggest amount of sun hours, we're not getting them in the ripening season. So here you have the graphic influences of San Miguel de Allende and the region of Dolores. That you have here the mountain system that is Los Picachos. These are some of the local ecosystem plants and animals that we have here. Always when you are trying to understand a wine region, to understand which are the local ecosystem trees and other plantations and the animals that live there, gives you a huge hint of how is the weather behaving and which other regions might be similar to that region that you are trying to understand. So here you have some of what we have here. So here you have another picture. So if we're going to see Guanajuato, obviously, like, you cannot plant vines in whole Guanajuato, but these are the main areas where vines are here in Guanajuato. So Dolores Hidalgo, San Miguel de Allende, Comonfort, that it's in direction towards Celaya, Guanajuato, very close to the capital of the state, San Felipe, San Francisco del Rincón, San Luis de la Paz, and Salvatierra. So if we try to make a synthesis about how is the profile of wines taking in account all of the factors that I mentioned. So the wine profile here tends to be like medium body, fresh, with nice acidity, balanced acidity, obviously, if you know how to work with it. And the amount of alcohol that you might expect from this region, it's what we call low alcohol in comparison to very hot climate regions that will be like 13.5 to 14 degrees of alcohol. So in general, these factors are a common factor in the region. So that is where in this chart that we're going to see quite a lot in each region through this presentation, that is where we located here Guanajuato. Oh, sorry, here it's in Spanish, but well, here it says hot climate regions, and this is cool climate regions. So Guanajuato is kind of here, if you see it. So in comparison to Ensenada, we're going to see it next, but it's like much more alcoholic wines, a more concentration, lower acidity. So start thinking a little bit like, so which style of wines I usually drink more or I like more? And then you might write in the chat, and then at the end we can discuss for those ones that share a little bit like the style that you usually drink or you like. I can give you some examples of which regions or maybe even which wineries might have something for your taste. Okay. Okay, I see here some questions also in the Q&A space. I'm going to read them a little bit further to not get distracted, but I want, when we finish Guanajuato, we answer them. So here you have the different wineries that Guanajuato have. So right now, these are the wineries that are open to enoturism. So I don't know if you already knew all of them or if a lot of them are new for you. I believe because we have spoke that a lot of people know Santísima Trinidad, maybe Tres Raíces, maybe Viñedo dos Búhos, that was one of the first years with Cuna de Tierra, along with Vinícola Toyan. So these are the 17 projects that you can visit here in the region. And you have also the Museum of Wine in Dolores, Hidalgo, that we were mentioning. This is my winery, the one that is here, Cava Garambullo. And we are open for public, but we are only open upon reservation because we're working all the time. So we work only upon reservation, and like that, we're able to book the visits properly and to give you the time and the presence that it's required. So, and these are the other 10 projects that are about to open here in Guanajuato region. So they already exist, they already have vineyard planted, but they are just still not open for public, but a lot of them you already can drink, and you might start finding very soon in different restaurants. For example, Tierra de Luz, it's very close to León, Guanajuato, and they have great rosé, and they are already like selling their wine. And I believe also you can have a visit only upon reservation. Or Cavas Manchón, they have been working for a lot of time. The winemaker is the winemaker of Cuna de Tierra, and it's his own small project, and they have been working for a lot of time. His father is one of the first new wave that started the plantations here in the area of Dolores, Hidalgo when Cuna de Tierra started the project. So yeah, so I posted here some information about my winery so that you know which one is it, and some of you might know us or you have seen us in town. Here is where we were sharing in the Food in Film Festival. Very happy and very excited to make a wine talk related to natural wines and to naked wines. So we were there sharing with that, and these ones are our labels. And there you have our Instagram. And I wrote there very quickly the amount of bottles that we work with, so that you also can understand, like our project is very small, very, like the production is very limited, but it's like, I don't know, I think that it is interesting what we are doing. We're working with 5 different terroirs of Guanajuato, working as consultants. We are very interested in understanding the differences in between, for example, Dolores Hidalgo with Comonfort, with San Miguel de Allende, and exploring the subtleties of the ripening, the differences in between the ripening in one side of Guanajuato and the other one. So we work with different vineyards, and for us it's our project, but it is also our, let's say, wine lab to explore the region and to learn more from it. Yes, I have an email and I have the phone, Sherry, so I will be sharing it. I think I have it. Yes, I prepare one thing to share you a lot of things. So at this moment, I'm going to share something in the chat, and there you can have a lot of information. It is kind of an address of information and some links. So if you want to do a copy paste, might be a good moment right now to get some of my info, but also of the Museum of Wine and a lot of different projects that I think that might be interesting for you to explore. I think, sorry, I share it only with Rebecca. So there you have. And then in relation to Guanajuato, here you have the biggest wineries in the region. So also that you can have some idea of, for example, how big is the biggest winery here. So it is 60 hectares. So for those that are in the wine industry and that you know a little bit about this, still 60 hectares, it's not that big. When we're speaking about 60 hectares in comparison to the world, it is what it is called a medium-sized winery in general. So I hope that it helps with this idea. So a lot of people were asking about awards. So you can make a search very easily for whole Mexican wines. But I just wanted to mention here, for example, that in the last 3 years, Cuna de Tierra already have won some awards in the last maybe 5 years. But these are the wineries that are sending their wines for some contest. Obviously, if you see, are part of the biggest wineries in the region, the ones that are doing it. Usually the smallest wineries were not that much into it. But so I'm going to see the questions that we have here. How are you seeking to differentiate your wine in Guanajuato region versus Baja Parras? And then there is another question that is, has Zinfandel been considered for planting in Guanajuato? It will seem that it could do well in this climate and with the soil types we have. Great questions. So I will answer first the one of Zinfandel because it is easier to answer it. So Zinfandel, it's a grape that usually requires a lot of sun in the last part of its ripening. So that is one of the reasons that it grows in south part of Italy, why it grows in Croatia, where it comes from. So in general, it is not an easy varietal to work here in Guanajuato because, as I mentioned with the climate, we don't have enough sun hours for those. So in general, actually is the opposite. For Guanajuato, we're working with varietals. It's a combination, because then when people understand it, then they are like, oh, so you can play with Riesling. That is why Pinot Noir, it's also tricky here. So because a lot of people start thinking about like, so cool climate region varietals. But the truth is that also we need varietals that work properly, that they don't have that much thick skin, so that they don't have that much tannins, so that the amount of sun that you get during the summer, it's enough to get ripen all the polyphenols and all the skins that will be the part that is giving the texture in the wine. So you want soft tannins. So in general, we need to work with varietals that are not very astringent, that are not very tannic. And then we need also varietals that have kind of a short ripening cycle, because you see that we're harvesting in July and August mostly. So if you're working with varietals that need a lot of time for ripening because they ripe very slowly, then when it gets to September, ripening kind of stops there. So for example, even that a lot of wineries work here with Cabernet Sauvignon, I prefer much more to work with Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc is earlier here. It gives great wines. For example, one of the reasons of why also New York use it a lot and they explore with Cabernet Franc instead of Cabernet Sauvignon, because Cabernet Sauvignon requires a bigger cycle than Cabernet Franc. So in general, my bet goes more to Cabernet Franc, and I usually don't like to work that much with Cabernet Sauvignon in the region, because it has sometimes, if the season is very rainy, then you might not get enough ripening from there. So and then we're going to speak about Baja, and then I will try to answer this Benjamin question about how to differentiate Guanajuato. Like in general, I see each region of Mexico as a unique universe, and it works kind of like that because we have a very different context, a cultural context that is very different. Like if you're here in Guanajuato, traditions, customs, the way how Mexicans think here and the owners think here are very different of how they are in Ensenada. So remembering this side of terroir, this part also creates a different mindset about the wines that we're creating. So it's not only about climate and soil, it is also about the influences that each one, that the region fits on. So Ensenada has been fitting on in some influences for a long time that are very different to Guanajuato. So also in the personality and what the wineries are seeking, quite different. I hope I have some time to go deeper into that at the end. And I don't know if, Ginger, there is something else to answer right now, or I shall continue, or Rebecca.
Yeah, there was a question about, are your wines exported?
My wines are still not exported. We are thinking about it, maybe to export something to New York, maybe choosing just a little bit some cities in the States. We would like to have some of our wines there, but we're still selling everything here in Mexico. We're starting to think, actually, we're seeing one importer this weekend. If we have, you will know.
Where does the majority of Mexican wine get exported? This is a question from Michelle Mayans.
That is a good question. And for example, each region usually have a different market and a different mindset of their own consumers. So for example, Baja California because Baja is very close to United States. So in general, a lot of them work with importers and they sell a lot in San Diego and they sell a lot in LA and they are selling in different cities, like main cities. So Ensenada wines are one of the ones that you might find the most in the United States. The European market, some of them are exploring it, but in general, because of how close we have United States, it is the biggest market for Mexican wineries. And then, for example, for Parras, speaking more precisely about Casa Madero, or for example, like bigger wineries, like the ones that are like the biggest and that have a lot of time producing here, they do have an international market also in Europe. They are selling also even some parts in Asia. But in general, United States and Canada are the biggest market.
Okay. There was a question about whether there was a wine map of Guanajuato and also of Mexico in general, of where wine is being produced and where, like maybe where each winery is located.
Yes, that is something that is very interesting. You cannot imagine how hard it is to put whole Mexico together in relation into wine. And even that we have an association that is like an international, like only from this whole 250 wineries maybe that exist in Mexico, only 40 are associated there because they are the biggest. And then each local region has its own association, but then like really right now we haven't reached the point where the producers, for example, here in Guanajuato, were enough close to the other regions to actually put all our statistic and all our information together. So right now, you need to go to each region to understand and to get the information and to get the maps that you might need to explore. So for example, here in Guanajuato, we do have now a map. I can send it maybe to you, Ginger.
Okay.
So that we can
send it to me on the website.
We can, or we can maybe forward it by mail. Okay. With the mail of the people that join us for the seminar, because it will take some time to track it down. But I do have one that we created for Guanajuato, so you can have a lot of the different wineries where are located. And then for other regions, you might need to go and ask for the different associations for their own maps. But each one of them are working on it.
All right, thank you, Natalia. There's a question from Brian about wine culture in Mexico. He says even some of the better restaurants in San Miguel, vintages are rarely included in wine lists. And he says, also, I have frequently been served dry reds cold right from the refrigerator. Can you please comment?
Yeah, well, yeah, in general, that is one of the things that, imagine, so we're still in the stage where not all the restaurants know what is going on in the wine industry. I think that is a job that we all collectively in each region we shall do to not just share about our wine project and about our winery, but to use these style of platforms to educate the sommeliers and to educate the different chefs in relation of all the information and that they can be updated. Because at the end, if all the industry is updated, it also it's easier to sell not just your brand, but actually to share the collective work that a region is doing. And I hope that more and more each producer understands that, and that when they are doing their job to share about their projects and their sales work, then they also can translate and share more about their region, and to understand that is, I think that could be a path to have so that the restaurants also can be more in tune with the information. And yes, also it is true, like sometimes we think that San Miguel de Allende, it's a New York, that it's a big city and that it's metropolitan. But like, let's not forget that we're outside of Mexico City and that we're kind of still like in a town. And if it's very different what you live in the culture of restaurants in the capital, where a lot of the tendencies of like the biggest cities, like you get very good service and you have like a good understanding of what wine is. But here in San Miguel de Allende, and sometimes even if you go to Guanajuato or if you go to Dolores, like wine is new in a way. Like people used to see it only as like red wine, white wine. Like to understand about varietals, and that the waiters and the sommeliers, even to have a sommelier. So it is a new industry. If you want to study here in Mexico about it, you only can make like short courses. There is you cannot go to the university to study enology, or there is no university for training sommeliers. There are only courses, and like it is not the same as what other countries have. I think that it is also a responsibility for the wine producers, maybe also to start doing. And there are a lot of projects going on. I hope that we can see the difference later. So I'm going to go further to Baja California so that we can use our time to finish and to see the different regions. So Baja California, 4,610 hectares. We're speaking here about more or less 150 wineries, which it is a good number, honestly. If you compare it maybe with the amount of wineries that other regions in France might have, or in another regions, it shows you that it is not that small. But it also shows you that the wineries are not that big. And I think that is something very important to understand about Mexico. I'm going to close with it, but I would like to start introducing this idea. Which are the producers of Mexico? And which are mainly the triggers for a wine producer here to produce wine? Because that is part of the style that you are going to be tasting also here. So a lot of people divide the wine world into the new world and old world. You know, that is like a common vocabulary for people that we read and that we understand about wine. So whenever we're speaking about new world, that means all the places where the grape wasn't originally from. So for example, to name some of the new world countries, that will be Chile, Argentina, United States, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia. And there is a tendency there that because it was New World, in general, there are regions or there are countries that are not working that much toward the traditional styles of Europe. And that in general, like for example, Chile might be one of the examples of the extreme version of this. They work with a lot of technology, and they work with a lot of industry in how they're producing their wines. I don't know if you perceive it, but for example, if you're going to try to taste the difference in between a Carmener, a Cabernet Sauvignon, a Merlot, sometimes from Chile, from a same winery, sometimes you don't taste the difference in between the varieties. And I think that shows how extreme the wine industry can go into losing a little bit the identity of the land and the identity of the varietal, and to show us what we really are expecting when we are drinking a wine. that is like to show us the origin, but to show us not only the origin of the land, but also like if I'm tasting Merlot, it's beautiful to understand as if it will be like a music, no? Like the tune of Merlot in comparison to Cabernet Sauvignon, and how our senses react to the different information that the different varieties have and the DNA of each variety. So in general, I would like to stress this point of like, when you're drinking Mexican wine, even that we're New World in the strict sense of the word, we're actually not working towards that much technology. We're not actually like a big industry, because in general, the wineries are medium size to small size wineries. And in general, that is one of the reasons also, like people are, the trigger for producing wine here in Mexico is because usually if you start asking the history of each winery, you cannot imagine the amount of people that will say like, I started my project because I love to drink wine. And because I loved wine that much that one day I said that I would like to have a land and to start my plantation and to do this and that. But I honestly think that if that is one of the triggers, I'm going to be trying to produce the cheapest wine. Honestly, you are focusing in medium range wines, and that is actually the biggest offer of Mexico in the diversity, not in quantity. But if you enter into a wine shop and you are seeing the different products, then you are actually seeing that that diversity of producers, usually focusing into medium range wines, and obviously the ones that have the best skills, then also focusing in premium wines. And only the wineries that are focusing in volume, then they are the ones that are providing the cheap wines that you can find, or like the most accessible in price wines that you can find in restaurants. But okay, I'm going to go to Baja so that we have time to finish Baja and for you to see some information. So I won't divert. So here's the amount of hectares. If you see, the rainfall is much more or less. And we're speaking here about a Mediterranean climate with influence, with a little bit of influence of oceanic influence. We speak about a region that receives much more sun than Guanajuato. And basically, Baja California is the one that differentiates the most of whole Mexico in their climate conditions. You have here, for example, for that person that was asking me about Zinfandel, for example, here Zinfandel grows very nicely. They're also working with a different style of Grenache, so you can expect very different profiles of Grenache, very different profiles of Syrah. For example, here we're speaking about the style of Syrah, very similar to Australia, to the hottest sites of Australia, while the Syrah that we produce here in Guanajuato, or that Chihuahua or Coahuila also produce, tend to be a little bit more continental. So that means with higher acidity, much more earthy, less jam, less ripen of the fruits in general in the taste. So a lot of people have some questions in relation to if we have indigenous varietals, and the answer is no, we don't have indigenous varietals of Vitis vinifera, because Vitis vinifera arrived with the Spanish in the conquest. But when the Spanish arrived here, the varieties that they brought to, in general, to whole America, the first varietals that America was working with, they were these last three that you see here: Moscatel, the white wine, and then Mission, the red wine. And then there is a polemic here in Mexico, because in general, if you search in the books, there is Rosa del Peru. In Chile, for example, they also call Mission País, and in general, it's supposed to be the same varietal, Mission and Rosa del Peru. But I have spoke with a lot of wine viticulture vine growers in Ensenada, and they mentioned that they have both that they have Mission and that they have Rosa del Peru, and that they ripen differently. So I don't know, I think that there is not very clear information on that. And I think that for sure it's a very interesting subject to understand better. There's, for example, a winery that works with Rosa del Peru in Ensenada that is called Vichy. And I think that it is interesting subject to go deep in and to understand it. Most probably, if it will be my theory, is that they are the same varietal, but they are different clones. And that is why they behave a little bit different in between them. So here you have some pictures of a little bit about the wineries. So you have wineries that that look a little bit more like that one that we were seeing here, no? That it's a different architecture, a little bit more inspiring the colony, in the colony architecture. And then you have much more modern wineries. This one is Santo Tomas. You can see the size of the vineyard. So for example, this is one of the big wineries in general that you can find a lot in supermarkets, and they focus in the whole range of style of wines, since like from in general cheap wines, but they also have premium wines. So you have here the map, and you can see here basically from whole Baja California, the wine region is concentrated in this size. These are the valles. These are the subregions that Baja has. And you can see, for example, this is a map that you can find there in the Provino site. You have the link in the information that I share, so you can see the difference in between them. So just to stress the point, so we're speaking about this style and profile of high alcohol, medium to high body, and more caramelized fruit. La Escuelita, it's a project that gives a lot of identity to the region of Baja California, because in general, it was a project, like, because what I was mentioning, no? So in general, you couldn't study to be a winemaker here in Mexico. So in the 80s, Baja used to have, for example, Pedro Domecq, and they used to have some wineries that were buying the grapes for different grape producers in the region. So it used to work as a cooperative, but a private cooperative. So basically, the big wineries, basically it was more or less like 30 wineries, they were supplying from the grape growers. But then Ensenada changed a lot, and it is very interesting if you go very deep into understand this region, because what happened with Ensenada is that with Hugo da Costa, that it's a winemaker that studied in Montpellier, and it is like, at that point, it was a new generation. So he used to work in Santo Tomas, if I remember well. And then he opened this project that it was a project where you could learn how to produce wine. So in a very artisanal way, where you weren't actually producing the wine and staying there for the whole season, but you will go to take some courses, and then you will learn, and you will have your own tank, and you will have your team, and you will share a barrel. And what happened with Ensenada, and that is how all the diversity of producers of Ensenada, no, not all of them, but one part of the producers that start changing the course of Ensenada happened because of this project, because they were studying winemaking there. And then they were like, so now I learned how to produce wine, so I want to have my own winery. So a lot of them, slowly, they went building up their wineries and their own projects. And what somebody was asking the other day, like, that sometimes you try wines that you didn't like, and that then you try maybe 3 years after Mexican wines from Ensenada, and you like them much more, and you think that the quality have improved. Well, obviously, if we actually think about how each winemaker is learning to produce wine. So this is what happened with Ensenada. Like a lot of producers were learning to produce wine by themselves, and they were trying to find their own voice. A lot of them starting to bring winemakers from abroad. And then other people start traveling. And right now, something that I think that it's important to mention about Ensenada is that because it is the most mature region that we have here in Mexico, we are about to start seeing, like they are right now in the one, mean that we still don't have the whole cycle of the sons and the daughters that already were born with a father that was a winemaker, and that they start understanding the culture, because that is one of how this industry works. When we're speaking about generations, when you hear about a winery in France that has 5 generations, it actually means like the amount of skill and the amount of understanding of their land and the amount of experimentation that somebody has in one site. So Ensenada is about to make that jump. Already there are obviously like 4 wineries that have the 2nd generation, but speaking more broadly about like these 150 projects, there is like you start seeing the early stages of the work of some of the winemakers, like son or daughter that are starting to do their thing. And it will be very interesting in 10 years to actually see how all these get more mature and the winemaking skills. And obviously you will see that along with Coahuila or with Chihuahua. So here you have some wineries, some of the names of some wineries. I don't know if you have a drink, a lot of them you might know. For example, Monte Chanic, L.A. Those ones are very easy to find in general in the supermarket, for example, or in some restaurants. But for example, to give some recommendations, Adobe Guadalupe is great, Vinisterra I love, Hacienda La Lomita, it's organic, La Carrodilla, it's biodynamic, Torres Alegre, it's a very interesting project from a winemaker that you might find a lot of different interviews, and it's interesting. He has a very precise style of work. Benacaba, interesting. And then almost all of them, I choose them because I like some of their wines. So very quickly, I'm going to show some numbers and some pictures of Chihuahua so we can have some time to close. So in general, Chihuahua is small. We have 20 wineries. The climate is continental and it's semi-desertic, but it is more extreme than Guanajuato because of what I already showed in the map and because it is more deep into the desert. So in general, you can have better ripening in Chihuahua and in Coahuila because they have more sun hours than what we have here. We work with very similar varietals, but you will expect there a little bit more of higher alcohol and a little bit less acidity. So if I will compare to some regions, Coahuila and Chihuahua, that will be with a very continental weather in Europe. So I know that it's not, for example, they're more similar to Argentina than what Guanajuato and Querétaro are. So to give an example. But for those that have tried wines, for example, from Serbia, also could be similar. These are the valleys where the grape grows. And these are some wineries that you might find there. And speaking about Coahuila, that is where is Parras and where is Casa Madero. So in general, oh, sorry, I left this number, but it is 1,950 hectares. That's how I have it in the circle. Sorry for leaving the number there, because this was from a different presentation long time ago, so I updated. So the amount of wineries have grown very quickly in Coahuila, because for a long time, Casa Madero and maybe other two projects there were like very established, but the winery was not growing very fast. So right now, it started to happen a little bit more diversity in the region, and it behaves very, very similar to Chihuahua. For example, to give you, you see, for example, here the trees. Some of the main things that both Chihuahua and Coahuila also grow, they grow, I don't know how to say it in English. They grow nogales, that is to produce nuts, and they grow also apples. So that gives you an idea about the weather. For example, you cannot produce that here in San Miguel de Allende, but in San Miguel de Allende it can grow lavanda, and it also can grow a little bit of olives, olivos, and they won't behave for example, if we are speaking about the taste of the olive oil, it is similar, for those ones that know a little bit about olive oil, a little bit to Lago di Garda from Italy, that it's like kind of cool climate region, but still obviously that the olives can grow in Italy. So it won't be like the style from the south of Italy, that it's more Mediterranean. So here you have some of the different valleys of Coahuila and some of the wineries that you know that we started mentioning last class. Viñedos Don Leo is the one that owned this award that we were sharing last week of the best Cab Sauvignon of the world. And then Querétaro, 420 hectares, 28 wineries. So we're very close to Querétaro. And if you have seen in this map, actually Querétaro, you could expect that it's kind of similar to Guanajuato. Querétaro, it's a little bit more suitable for whites and for sparkling wine, and a little bit less for reds, but still we have produced very beautiful reds there, and I know plenty of producers that are working very nicely with reds. But you should expect this style that I was mentioning, that it will be like more light reds and a little bit more fresh and also fresh fruit. So very, very similar to Guanajuato. We're very similar in the geography, but we're very, very different in the personality of the wineries and what are the growers, because at the end, Guanajuato and Querétaro, even that they are very similar, even in their history, and they share the independence and they share a lot of the different influences of Guanajuato, it's like they are sisters, but they are very different sisters in personality. So in general, the producers are also very different. If you go a little bit deep and visiting the wineries, you will start seeing that the culture is different. And at the end, also, one of the things that is happening here in Guanajuato is that Guanajuato, each region, it's always, it has this reciprocity of creating also wine for the people that live there or the people that transit there. So in general, I think that Guanajuato has this huge challenge of, because we have an international market in town, in general, like it's very interesting how that also, for some of us, influence the idea of the quality that we require to be in the international level. I don't mean that we're all there. I think that we're all trying our best, and I hope that when you try the wines, you can see it reflected in the wines. But I think that that is a huge challenge. And in general, Querétaro has another market. So that also influences in a different way the wine. So here you have some of the wineries. If you want to make a screenshot, it also could be interesting for you to go deepening more into them. But in the link that I sent you, you can see the wineries in the ABQ, that is the association. And they don't have a museum, but they have a very interesting project that they have their own artisanal wine school, something similar to what Ensenada used to have, but it's different. It's not the same winemaker that started the project. It's directed by different people, so the enological tools and the enological point of view, it's very different, so the wines. But it is a project that is teaching a lot of community how to produce wine, and it's influencing the region. So this is what we, in total, what we saw. You have here some of the wineries of Zacatecas and Aguascalientes that I didn't want to take time of the webinar to show more regions, but in general, if you want some references from it, you can have them there. We have some Q&A to answer, but I want to see how are we with time. We have maybe 10 minutes, so we will choose some of them and we will go closing. So for those ones that would like to have my mail and my Instagram, I leave it here in the screen a little while, so you also can write it down or whatever you need. And I open a little bit the mic to Ginger. Is there anything going on that I shall answer first? Or I shall go first with the ones that we received by mail.
Natalia, you'd asked for the wines that people like, and the list that we have, we've got some people who are fans of Tempranillo, Malbec, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, and Italian Pinot Grigios. And one question was, which vineyard in Querétaro and Guanajuato has the best Tempranillo?
Okay, so this is something very interesting for that person that likes Tempranillo. I even will love if you share later your answer with me when you try the Tempranillos in the region. You can write to me in Instagram, because even that the region in Querétaro and the region in San Miguel de Allende are working with Tempranillo, you should expect a big difference of the Tempranillos that you are used to drink if your reference is Spain. Because Tempranillo in Spain grows in a region that it's much more hot than here. So something that I find a lot with different consumers is that if you love the varietal, but in relation to Spain, sometimes you get a little bit confused by the Tempranillo here, because then you are like, this is not my Tempranillo, no? But if I will suggest you to try some beautiful Tempranillos that I love, and I think that might be a good reference for you, I think that that Santísima Trinidad is doing a great job with Tempranillo. I think that you should try it. And I have one producer that I actually consult. So I know very well his Tempranillo, because like we harvested together and I help in the wine production. And I think that it could be very interesting for you to try. And they are called Tierra de Peña. So I will write it here, Tierra de Peña. You can follow them in Instagram, or I think they have a website, or if you want, for whoever that wants to write and the time is not enough for answering your questions, but you would like to keep sharing, I have always my social media on to share things. I love that. So what else, Ginger?
There was a question about which Mexican wines come to mind when thinking of age worthiness.
Can you repeat it?
Like for aging, for keeping, for...
Okay, that's an interesting question. I also see here quickly the one of Linda, that is the Gewürztraminer question. And yes, you have one winery that is producing it, and it's in Querétaro. Well, at least that I know. Maybe you find more and you can tell me. But the one that I know, it's called Vinaltura in Querétaro. And they don't produce it as dry wine, but they are producing it. They're trying with the semi-sweet style. I tried once. And so speaking about the aging, So in relation to the aging, there are some things that you need to be able to age properly a wine. So a lot of people think that it's acidity, but acidity is important, that the wine is well made and is healthy, yes, also, but this is the biggest trick, that it's enough concentrated. So that is why only basically the premium wines are the ones that are able to age properly. One of the things that create concentration in grapes, yes, are the yields, and you can work with it in the cellar, but like you will read it everywhere, it is how old are the vines. Because usually, and in the world, you are not able to age wines that come from young vines. So even that, I would love to say, as a representative of Mexican wine in this moment in the webinar, that we have great aging potential. I think we have, if I put it in the international context, I think we have a great medium aging potential. So that translates in maybe 5 years, only great wines that have been produced in Mexico, and we're speaking about very, very few are able to age properly 10 years. But for example, these tendencies or these trends where a wine can age from Bordeaux, from Burgundy, from, like, we're speaking about the top side of the wine industry. I think Mexico is still not there because we don't have enough old vines mainly. And I think that when we arrive to that point, I also hope that we have, in a collective way, the great understanding of how to take care of those grapes in the cellar to produce great wines that can age maybe 20 years or 30 years. So I hope that will answer.
Natalia, there was one question from Benjamin. I can't remember if you answered it. You said you were going to talk about seeking to differentiate the wines in the Guanajuato region versus Baja or Parras. Did you answer that?
Yes, I think that it's kind of explained through the different parts that I spoke. Maybe you can choose one from here. Well, maybe that one, that it's a very practical one. So where you can find Mexican wines and where you can get good stuff. So here are some tricks where you can explore. Amazon is actually starting to sell some Mexican wine, and they have some great wineries selling through Amazon. One wine that I like a lot, and I saw that they were selling in Amazon, for example, is called Hilo Negro. It's a cool winery, Hilo Negro. And I think you can find it in Amazon. Or you can go there and you can place like that. So there are wine shops as La Europea or maybe Cava Sauto if you're here in San Miguel. But I think that one of the things that the pandemic triggered actually is that a lot of wineries that were not selling online and that they were selling in very reduced markets, they opened their wine shops. So you can track actually right now like plenty of different websites. I work with some that are here. For example, this is a wine shop that is called On Cork. There is another one that is selling beautiful natural wines. We're also working with them. I have to see the name. It's called Salvaje Vinos. There is one and then you can go actually to track some of the name of the wineries that we saw, and a lot of them have like wine shops to sell. So some that I know that maybe you will love to try: Henry Lurton, Benacaba from Ensenada. And here in Guanajuato, you can get the wines almost of all of the wineries and the different projects in the museum. And you can do wine tastings there, and you can order home. And then for those ones that live, I think that there's not too much people that are connected from Mexico City or from Querétaro. But there is a project that is specialized in Mexican wine. So it's maybe like a Europea, but only of Mexican wine. And it's called La Contra. You can search the project also in internet, and maybe they are start working in home delivery, in the home delivery style. And Cava Garambullo, we're doing home deliveries here in San Miguel de Allende with special prices for San Miguel de Allende. So there are some options there.
Natalia, there was a question about what's the name of the winery between San Miguel and Common Fort on the right-hand side of the road if you're heading outside of town up on the hill?
Yes, that winery is called Viñedo San Miguel.
Okay. Gracias.
You're welcome. Okay, well, I think that we're on time to start saying goodbye. I hope that this was useful for everybody. I want to thank so much Rebecca and Ginger for the platform, for inviting me to share in your program and your cultural project. I think you're doing an amazing job, and I love to be part of it.
Thank you, and we hope that you'll come back and continue. And I look forward to trying your wine.
We're trying to figure out, and
Yes.
we have worked out the logistics of doing a virtual wine tasting. So stay tuned for that. Keep an eye on our website, Language Adventure Pros. Check out our webinars page. Today's presentation was recorded, and we will have that up there tomorrow. And you can register for our future programs. In July, we have Mexican muralisms with a mural expert in town. And we are really excited about that. And we look forward to welcoming Natalia back to learn more about wine. We also will have a return visit from Bill of the Mask Museum and from Albert Coffey to talk about Cañada de la Virgen.
Yes, and we are also working on a webinar with the Mohegan Museum, and they will also be joining us. So look forward to seeing you all again online, and everybody stay safe and healthy. Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you, Natalia.
Ciao, ciao. Ciao to everybody. Thanks for connecting from everywhere.
All right, take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.